Hey there, it's Chris Acton with Acting Creative, and this is a hand-woven experience, episode 62. And in this episode, I am going to talk about multiple colors in the warp. So let's start from the top. Why would you want to do this? Well, let me show you a little sample. This is a fabric I did a while ago, and you can see these are my warp yarns going this direction, and the fringe always gives it away. That tells you which yarns are your warp yarns. So I used a blue, a chartreuse, a white, and a gray. Those are the colors that I used in my warp yarns. And the reason that I always include 2 or more colors in my warp is that I like the way the fabric looks. I like the complexity of the colors. I like to watch the interaction between my weft yarn and all those different colors of warp yarns. For me, it just makes it a very, very exciting fabric. But as a side benefit, it also hides any irregularities. We won't call them mistakes or sins, but if there's a little something going on that's not quite according to plan, you can hide them much easier in a fabric that has multiple colors in your warp. So let's talk about what that looks like to warp a project that has multiple colors. So behind me, I've got my warping board with a yellow cotton, just starting a project out right now. So for now, I just have the one color, but I want to add a second color. I want to add a green, kind of a grassy green. So to add another color, I've got a couple options. First of all, I could very easily take this around my starter peg with my scissors, do a little snip snip, cut it, call it good. But if I know I'm going to come right back to this yellow yarn after I put my green on, one of the things I like to do is put my yarn on, we'll call it a holding peg. See, this is my starter peg. This one that's next to it, that's the one that I use. So I take my yarn and I wrap it around this peg here, just a couple wraps, and then kind of push it to the back and get it out of the way. Now, that yarn is in a safe spot where it can sit there for as long as you're comfortable with. So I can take my green yarn, I can put it on the starter peg, I can wind on my green for however many passes I need, and then I can easily come back to the yellow without having to constantly be cutting it. So that's a nice option for you if you know you're going to change colors. You've got some major stripes like in your warp. Something else that I wanted to mention though is a trick that I use a lot, is the idea of carrying 2 yarns in your hand at the same time, which can both be different colors. So let me show you what that looks like. First of all, I'm going to start with my green. I went ahead and did my little loop just to save me a little bit of time. I'm going to drop this on the floor so it'll unwind correctly. Oops, pops right off. Of course that happens. Okay, just like this. And then I'm going to take my yellow yarn from here. So now I have both yarns in my hand right here, right? It's easy to carry 2 of them. That makes life a little bit easier. So I know I want my green yarn to go first. Green is going to go over the first peg, yellow goes under, and they switch after that. Then I'm just going to move down the board with both yarns in my hands. Come back up like this. The green is first, so it follows the same path just like that. Come around to this peg, and voila! You have now included 2 colors at the same time into your warp. So that is another kind of fun option. As a matter of fact, you can see in my fabric here, even like this one is a good example. See, in my warp, I went white, gray, just like that. But it creates a really interesting, looks like a really complicated effect. And of course it's not. So if you can get used to kind of carrying 2 at a time down your board and back up, that's a great way to do it. So those are just a couple thoughts on using more than one color in your warp. If you haven't tried it yet, I encourage you to give it a go. It could really change the way you think about your next weaving project. All right, my friends, let's go be creative this week and make something brilliant. Have a great one. And of course, happy weaving.